If x and y are integers, is x greater than y? Well, statement number 1, x plus y is greater than 0, doesn't give us much to go on. Doesn't give us much of a way to distinguish between x and y. For example, x could equal 1 and y could equal 3, in which case the prompt would be false, y would be greater than x, or x could equal 3 and y could equal 1, in which case the prompt would be true and x would be greater than y. So by itself, this statement gives us absolutely no way to determine whether x is greater than y or whether y is greater than x. So the statement by itself is insufficient. Statement number 2 tells us very interestingly y to the power of x is less than 0. So let's think about this. If we take a positive number and raise it basically to any power, we're going to get a positive. If we take a negative and raise it to an even power, we're going to get a positive. If we take a negative and raise it to an odd power, then we're going to get a negative. So this is interesting. It tells us, first of all, that y has to be negative and x has to be odd. But that still doesn't tell us which one is greater, because odd numbers, of course, come in both positive and negative. So, for example, we could have x equals negative 3 and y equals negative 5, in which case what we'd have here is negative 5 to the power of negative 3. That would be a negative fraction, but it would still be less than 0. That would work. Or we could have x equals negative 5, y equals negative 3. And then we'd have negative 3 to the power of negative 5. That would be another negative fraction, but that would still be less than 0. So in other words, even consistent with this, we can still pick two different ways. One way makes x bigger, one way makes x smaller. So this statement is still insufficient. But now if we combine the two statements, we get something interesting. If we combine the two statements, what happens is we see from the second one that y has to be negative. Well, if y is negative and x plus y is positive, that necessarily means that x must be a positive number. And in fact, x must be a positive number with an absolute value bigger than the absolute value of y. Well, if x is positive, y is negative, any positive number is bigger than any negative number. So that means that x has to be greater than y. So this combined information is sufficient to answer the question. So the statements individually are not sufficient, combined they are sufficient. That is answer choice C.